What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York, calling from the quarantine zone again, and this time we got Dani Filth of Cradle of Filth. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Yeah. It's so awesome to have you here. We're here to talk about this live stream that's happening October 30th at the St. Mary's Cathedral. That is an awesome live stream waiting to happen. Is there like a specific reason why you chose to have the live stream at this particular location?
Well, it's not a cathedral. It's just a rudimentary church. But hey, what's that between friends? So, well, yes. The reason we chose it is that it suited what with the lockdown and travel restrictions. It suited the band quite well because it's in an adjacent town to which I live. It's in Essex. It's in like the oldest town in Britain. It's a place that we played before. We know the layout. We know the manager of the place. It's a great venue. Obviously, it's in a church as well, so very evocative for the show. Originally, we were having it in July, but obviously because of the nature of the pandemic, the building work they were having done, restorative work, went on a lot longer. So it was July, then August, then September, and then we went, fuck it, we might as well just have it at Halloween. Perfect. There we go. And then the building work would have finished long before we set foot in the place. And also it made us, logistically, it was a lot easier to get two people from the Czech Republic and a guy from Sweden over than to relocate everybody involved in the band from the British Isles to other countries, especially as the government are shutting the travel corridors like willy-nilly. Like, can we go to Portugal? Yes. Next week? No. And then they impose a 2-week I was going to say incubation period and no quarantine period. I'm actually going to Italy for a short break at the weekend, and I'm just praying that while I'm there they don't announce that Italy has gone beyond the pale, and when I have to return I have to quarantine for 2 weeks, because that's naturally going to be a fucker, because I'm supposed to be finishing the mix of the new album when I get back.
Yeah. Well, now, obviously you mentioned that you're working on some new music as well, but before we talk about that, for this particular live stream, are you going to do like a special like set list in a way? I thought maybe since it's the 20-year anniversary of Midian this year that maybe we could be getting some more material off of that, or like are you going to maybe do a different set list that we normally wouldn't get at a Cradle of Filth concert?
But people have to wait and find out. We just promise it's going to be good.
Okay, the plot thickens. Now, you mentioned working on new music now. Are you planning to make like a direct continuation from what people were hearing off of Cryptorania, The Seductiveness of Decay, or are you planning to maybe do something that we may have never heard from Cradle of Filth before?
Well, I mean, the album's finished. In fact, today we had some narrative parts that were being remotely done from here to a studio in America. And said person, that was it. They capped off the album. They finished all the contributions to all the pieces of the puzzle have been delivered, and the producer is currently just assimilating all the drum edits and everything like that, just in time for me to return next Wednesday, and then we'll probably be in the studio 3 to 4 weeks mixing a record. It's very hard to speak about the record, even like when the record is about to be released and people have probably heard like 3 tracks. It's still going to be hard to describe the record, because it's well, put it this way, somebody prior to you who was interviewing me basically just gave me a list of things. He said, is it going to be this, and I was like, yeah, that's it, it's going to be all of those things. And it was like a lot heavier and a lot simpler in places and more intricate in others and more atmospheric in others. The theme of the record is existential dread or terror, fear of the unknown, like us on the brink of extinction. And so the music personifies that.
Well, we're like, as you mentioned, like, you have all these different sounds, and it's hard, like, because as a fan of Cradle of Filth, if you played me like 30 seconds to a minute of a song, I could tell that would be off of Nymphetamine, or that would be off of Thornography or Cruelty and the Beast, etc. So it's fair to say that Cradle of Filth has always taken a new approach to every album and experimented as much as possible, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's very different from the last record, but like I say, hard to pin down, really. I don't think any of our records you could pin down to one style. Yeah, no, it's difficult for me to even do that, you know?
Yeah. Do you ever like enter the studio or enter songwriting with a preconceived idea of what you want to do, like with a concept, or is there kind of like a lot of
Oh yeah,
improvising?
absolutely. But I'm just talking about how to describe the music. I mean, it's there's so much going on this record, so many different inflections. I guess. I mean, it's hard to describe each song. Each song's an entity unto itself. Some are heavier, some are catchier. Yeah, I mean, the emphasis is on catchy. It's very sing along. If there's such a terminology for what we do, it's still intense. It's still fast. It's still melodic. It's still very ethereal and creepy, evocative and cinematic. But we've just branched out and tried new things all over the place. So yeah, and obviously, again, this quarantine period, this term of isolation has provided us with the ammunition to revisit and rework and just take things at an idle pace. Like I said, we should have been on tour now. I mean, the album should have been finished and delivered, but with no end in sight to anybody's ending of this pandemic. There was no need to rush, and that gave us this unusual aspect that for once we could really relax when we were doing a record, because we were bereft of any deadline. There was no one screaming at our shoulders saying, "It was supposed to be delivered yesterday, where the fuck is it?"
Yeah, definitely. I'd imagine that, like, for any band that is making a record at this time, it does have to make it a little bit easier with, nothing else going on.
Well, yeah, naturally, but that's if you can afford the studio. You've got to pay those.
Of course.
So, yeah, the studio was a little bit more expensive, but hey, it was worth it.
Definitely. Definitely. As a vocalist, do you need to hear music before you come up with lyrics, or do you have like the concepts or a story in mind, and that can help dictate the direction of the music as well?
Yeah, a bit of both, really. Sometimes I have total ideas which I say to everybody, right, okay, this is it. It's going to be like lemon flavoured, the song, or whatever, but just as a silly example. But and other times, the music totally governs and steers. Particularly with this record, because a lot of the material was written in hotel rooms across a very busy schedule last year. I distinctly remember being in South America and sitting in hotel rooms with a guitarist and a bass player, coming up with some ideas and back of tour buses and sound checks. And so yeah, this album was very much dictated by a mood, and and more songs I think were written for this record that were rejected as well, which is always a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
So the quality, there's no lack of quality on this. I mean, I'm having a hard job, to be honest, because I'm always tinkering around with the album, a bit like a faulty Millennium Falcon.
Yeah.
And I've shuffled the running order about like as many times as it's possible to shuffle it around. It's had every possible conceivable layout, and it's proven very difficult because like all the songs are really strong. There's no sort of song you want to say, oh, that's definitely a track 8 song, because by then people would have given up on the record.
That's really funny. Aren't you ever worried like the songs you reject are going to be a B-side one day and just be the biggest hit you guys ever had?
Well, funny you should say that, but yeah, sometimes you totally get the perception wrong. I mean, Amphetamine itself was only really aside from a middle section of a greater song, it was never destined for for a video or a single. Not from the off. It wasn't our first choice. but the record company kind of heard it in a different way, and and obviously since then a lot of people have heard it in a different way as well. So it's all about perspective, really, and sometimes being very close to a band, you can't see the wood for the trees. And it's the same here. We're looking at our first single and our video, which is going to be a massive endeavour as well, because we've got to fly to Latvia to film it, which is the basis where we did the previous album video for Heartbreak and Seance. The artist, Arthur Bazinch, who undertakes all the artwork, or has done for the last two records, also is the director for the video. So it's all very, hook in mouth, hand in cheek, that sort of thing. So even with that, we're struggling, because each day, really I know from day one that was going to be the first song, but severely doubting it now, because this is a way, not a better song, but this one is more immediate, and it keeps juggling around. And yeah, I guess that's a good thing, but it's as confusing as fuck for the director.
Oh man, music video directors is a special place in heaven for all of them.
Yeah.
Now, it's really interesting that you have all these concepts and these stories, because I feel many different emotions from, your music. Like, to have a song like The Death of Love versus a song like Forgive Me, Father versus like the title track from Amphetamine. It's fair to say that like a lot of the albums, even though you have these concepts and stuff, I feel like every song could also be a reflection on how you are particularly feeling at the same time, right?
Yeah, I guess so, yeah. Yeah. I guess a bit of your personality always slips into songs.
Yeah, it's like it's impossible to really separate yourself from the art.
Well, if you're this far immersed, it's not, no.
Do you almost feel like maybe like the longer you're working on something, though, the harder it is to kind of maintain that creative spark or that emotional spark that could drive an album?
Sometimes. Yeah, sometimes you lose the wood for the trees, but I think with this record, we've been, like I say, we've had plenty of time, and we've worked less hours, but more of them, and we've taken necessary breaks. Like, the producer at the present is actually isolating because he had to take a holiday. I mean, he was literally going to go insane. So him and his girlfriend went to Croatia, and while he was there, the travel corridor shut, because basically their rate of infection over the whole country, even though where he was zilch, literally zero infection. But they were just taking figures across the whole of Croatia, and so that he had to, on his return, had to self-isolate for 2 weeks, which is not a problem for him, because he's just got drum edits and the sort of fundamental basic work of setting a mix up to do, which he can do from home. He doesn't actually have to be in the studio to do any of that. So yeah, that's lucky. It won't be so lucky for me if I have to.
Yeah, I've always said that isolation is the greatest fuel for creativity.
Yeah, and madness.
Of course. What's the difference at this point? Now, do you like to leave the concepts of a Cradle of Filth album open to interpretation, or because you put your heart and soul and energy into these lyrics, you try to maybe engage the listener into what the music could be about?
Well, yeah, I think so. I think everything for an album does that, from the artwork to the lyrics, obviously naturally to the music, to the videos, the way you conduct yourself and present your art to the listener or the viewer. So yeah, I mean, obviously you want to get your point across, but I do like leaving it quite liberal. I like people to interpret stuff. I don't like things, if I'm reading stuff or be part of something, I want to interpret it the way I interpret it. And sometimes, an album can become better because of self-interpretation. Like, those quirky records you like, and everybody else looks at you and goes, what the fuck? Well, I've got loads of those. And I love them because, for example, here's a great one, Infernal Overkill, the first true, proper Destruction album. Okay, production's not great. Drums slightly out of time. That doesn't bode well for a classic record. But it's up there in my top 10. I just love it. There's something about it. From the time I heard it to the album cover, there's a special feeling attached to it, and I still get it when I listen to the record. Same as I do with Don't Break the Earth by Merciful Fate. Other people look at me when I describe those albums as if I'm fucking mad, you know? Metallica surely would, because they don't seem to fucking touch Don't Break the Oath with the Barge Pole. It's always Melissa they seem to cover. But yeah, I think self-interpretation. You need to leave an opening for people, because like I say, the mind is probably the most creative thing. If you've got loads of other people interpreting your art, and you've given them enough room to do that, but they still get the gist of what it's all about, then you've won, really.
Definitely. I feel like you're able to approach your lyrics both from a very literal and metaphorical standpoint.
Good. Just racking my brains for something to answer that.
Now, I know you've probably been asked this 1,000 times, but I was always curious as a fan of Cradle of Filth because, going as Dani Filth and the way that you portray yourself both in the albums and, I've seen you at every single New York City show for, the past decade now at this point. Do you almost feel like in Cradle of Filth that you're portraying a character, or is this just a direct extension of who you are personally?
Well, I guess it's a bit of both. You can't be that character 24/7 naturally. Everybody has to do grocery shopping unless you're super rich, or don't eat groceries. So yeah, it's an extension of my personality, totally, 100%. But at the same time, it is a character, I guess. It's you, but it's also a character. It's although you don't take it off, that's a good thing. That's a good point. You don't really take it off. Unless, hanging around with family, at a garden pie or whatever, at the weekend. I'm still Dani Filth, but I'm not in Dani Filth mode, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, definitely. I mean,
Alice Cooper best described it, and yeah, if anybody wants to know about that, check him out. Gets me off the hook.
Yeah. Alice Cooper, I never heard of him. I got to check him out.
Yeah. Well, she's lovely.
Because it's funny. I've always wondered, when you take bands that have very vivid imagery, did the image of Dani Filth come into mind as soon as you started the band, or did this kind of develop as you started writing more and getting more at one with your creativity?
I think it's just a natural progression, to be perfectly honest. I think it really only sort of grew when I put Filth at the end of my name on the Cruelty record, and that album had catapulted us into I wouldn't say the main, kind of mainstream. And from there on in, it was just like a tag thing, and it was easier for magazines to get their head around, and then controversy kind of followed us. And so, yeah, I guess the magazines and whoever interviews you at that point, they wanted a larger-than-life character, so it just developed like that, to be honest.
It came from both an intern.
You can't have larger-than-life characters if there's nobody gives you the access for that. Do you know what I mean? If they pigeonhole you in such a tiny, small space, then a manipulative space, then you're never going to be that character. But if you're given free pasture to roam, as it were.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny too, because I'd imagine that when you're in the vocal booth and you're tracking vocals, or when you're songwriting, you almost kind of have to get into that mode a little bit as well, right? Is there anything that ties playing live and songwriting together in the creative process?
Well, yeah, just jamming. I mean, it's hard for us as a band because we're kind of international. We don't all live in each other's pockets, let alone in each other's countries. So, we for a record. I mean, we didn't have to do it for this record because we was literally together touring all last year. So, the majority of the record had already been written. No, well, that's not true because we actually wrote some more stuff while we were in the studio and replaced it. I'd say 75% had been written before we finished the touring cycle last year. Mm-hmm. And again, so lucky. that we finished a touring cycle. A few months later, this hits, and we happened to be in the studio. But thankfully, the drummer, Martin, had already been over and recorded his drums from the Czech Republic. Then the travel corridors shut. Everybody was in isolation. We only actually just got our second guitarist, Ashok, who's also from the Czech Republic, in to record. I mean, he's only about 4 or 5 weeks ago he was in.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Martin did his drums back in February. That's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, this is going to be like a different, like if a listener were to listen to this new album through like a span of time and like got a real good detail, would they be able to tell like which parts are older than others?
No, absolutely not. No.
Okay, that would make an interesting composition for sure.
Yeah, wouldn't it?
Yeah. So before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time today. Really enjoyed this discussion. Just obviously, you have the live stream performance happening on October 30th. This interview will be uploaded by midnight, so if it hasn't been announced yet, don't say it here. But when could we be expecting the new Cradle of Filth album, if you're allowed to say? And is there just anything else you would like to promote? Obviously, when this pandemic's over, we'll probably be seeing you on the road quite a bit, right?
Well, absolutely, yeah. I think you'll be seeing a lot of people on the road. You know, it's going to be like opening the starting gates at a horse race. Or a greyhound race, or any race for that matter. A human race. I can't really speak much about the album because I've been told not to. And also, it's untitled at present. I mean, I know the title. I've discussed it with other people. I've discussed it with the artist. I received the front cover yesterday. It's fantastic. Fucking great. It's the same artist that did the last 2 records, as I mentioned. Gone for a different colour scheme totally on this record. Yeah, I mean, this is a very worthy successor to the last record, but it's different in so many ways and also familiar in so many ways as well. It's a Cradle of Filth record, and it's hard to pin down exactly, as I said, what's happening where. You just have to listen to it and enjoy it for that. In fact, when he actually comes to talk about the album, I don't think I'm really going to talk very much about it at all this time, because I think it's just a waste of time. I think it's best for people just to hear it. And by that point, people would have heard a couple of singles, anyway. But we're hoping it's going to be out March to April next year. I mean, it was due to be out a lot earlier, but obviously pandemic and all that. So, yeah, we're probably looking for the first single right at the beginning of the year. We'll get Christmas out of the way.
Okay, sounds good, and we definitely look forward to hearing it. Again, Dani, thank you so much. Everybody, we are here with Dani Filth of Cradle of Filth. Catch them at their live stream performance at St. Mary's Church, October 30th. This is Alex from Heavy New York. We will see you next time. Is it cool to post this now just because we talked a little bit about the new album?